to End Credits. I'm Corey Tibbetts.
And I'm Miles Rourke.
And this is the podcast that talks to people working behind the scenes in the entertainment industry. And
that's right.
I'm already stuttering because we're live for the first time. This is a grand experiment, so we're going to get a grand guest. I've been trying to get Tom Bancroft on the podcast for 2 years, and he finally has a reason to come on because he's got some self-promotion to do. So this is our first live stream. You can share it with your friends after the fact. It will go up on our podcast stream in a day or two. But if you are listening to this after the fact, then go subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/creditspodcast. And that way you can catch all the live streams, and whenever we post videos up there, there's already a few of our live shows up there that we've done at different Comic-Cons, and one of our Algonquin College shows is also up there with Ron Husband, which if you haven't watched it yet, I would definitely watch that. He's a very insightful gentleman.
Indeed.
But, and I should mention, we are in our new studio location at Sigma Media, and we have a new producer. I'm no longer producing the show all by myself. It's Michelle Legault is now our producer.
And as you can see, it's very green.
Yes, eventually we will get a virtual set back there or something, so it's not so green. But without further ado, let's introduce our guest, Tom Bancroft, who of the one half of the Tom Bancroft, the Tom Bancroft brothers, the Bancroft Brothers animation podcast, which I am a big fan of. How are you tonight, Tom?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys. I get a little nervous around me too, so don't worry about it. You know, I get that you're going to be a little, verklempt.
Yeah, I mean, you're no Aaron Blaze, but
Oh!
At least you said you're not no Tony Bancroft or something like that.
Of course not. That guy's got a big enough ego as is.
Oh, tell me about it. Oh my gosh. Unwarranted.
Oh man. So we will be talking about Tom's Kickstarter project that is going on. You've got an art book that you're kickstarting, and it's, when I checked today, it was at 185% funded.
Yeah, I love that number. It sounds so good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Who said there's only 100%?
Right. Excessive. I want to go over that.
Absolutely. Well, we usually start with breaking in stories. I've heard yours, but for people who maybe have not listened to the Bancroft Brothers animation podcast, you get to tell it totally from your side this time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know. That'll be nice. I don't have Tony butting in.
Exactly. But so there was never a plan to be a doctor, a lawyer, a police officer. You guys always wanted to be artists.
Absolutely not. Yeah, no. Tony and I were doomed from the start. We were drawing when we were tiny, and we were not good at anything else. I've had a lot of odd jobs, like in high school and just out of high school, and I pretty much lost them all. And I can't do anything that's not art, really. My train of thought, I'm just in my own world. And so, yeah, as a file clerk and a security guard, and I worked at a donut shop, pretty much all those jobs, I got fired.
Yeah, file clerk is a fun one, isn't it? Ooh.
Yeah. Oh, and it was the midnight at a hospital. So I would literally stay up all night filing. Can you believe that? So, yeah, how I got into it was, like I said, Tony and I drew all the time, and our first love was comic strips. And so I loved the Peanuts comic strip, and Garfield came a little bit later, and then Bloom County and Calvin and Hobbes, of course. So it was kind of like a second golden age in the early 80s for comic strips. And so that was something that me and Tony wanted to do. We wanted to be cartoonists. And so that was our training, and we kind of just constantly looked at those strips and tried to be as professional as we could and learn inking and all the things that you need to know except for writing, to be a comic strip artist. That was the thing we didn't care about. And it turns out that's the most important part. So did that in high school and did that into junior college. And then one day, one of the fellow comic strip artists on the school newspaper, we saw his artwork and we were like, oh my gosh, this guy's really good. It was sort of like the first person that we met that was, at our artistic level or above, and so, and I don't mean that in any cocky way. I just mean we hadn't met one like that, and he had a lot of the same loves of animation and comic strips, and so we were like fast friends. His name was Eric Stefani, and so he did a lot of comics, but one day he said, "You guys got to come by. I did some animation. You got to see it." So we went to his house. We couldn't believe it because he'd done this clay animated little short, and it was about his family and set to music that he wrote. He was a musician, and so he said, "Yeah, I just made it with a Super 8 camera," and that was like a huge moment for us because we always thought you had to have, a huge staff of people, millions of dollars to make any kind of animation,
Yeah.
And because remember, this is before the internet. There wasn't free programs. There wasn't really any programs out to make animation at home. But here you could just have a stop motion camera, a Super 8 camera, and make little clay animate. You could do stop motion. And so that set us on the course to do stop motion. And that summer we did like a little music video, not a professional one, but, one for us, and made it with Eric. And by the way, Eric went on he was the founder of No Doubt. His sister was Gwen Stefani.
Okay.
So,
I would say I was going to ask you that. When you said Stefani, it's like it's not a name you hear that often.
no, I know. Yeah, it's not. I haven't met one since. But yeah, they're a great family. They all came to our weddings, both of our weddings. We were good friends with them. But that was a side note. But yeah, that kind of got us on the track and fell in love with animation. Once we saw the clay animated characters kind of come to life, and it just was like this huge eye-opening experience. And then we went, wait a second, we already draw. Why don't we do drawn animation like Disney? And so we started researching that and found out that, because we lived in California, we found out, well, just down the road is California Institute of the Arts, and that school was founded by Disney, by Walt. And so it had a lot of Disney animators, that worked there. Or co-founder. There were probably others, but they'd set that school up to be sort of a training ground for the Disney animators, and a lot of the animators at the studio would work there at night. So it was like, and at the time, it was one of the only schools for animation. Now there's everywhere. There's animation schools. But it was the premier one. It was the best one. It's still one of the best, if not the best. And so we went there for about a year and a half. We're running out of money because my mom and dad, I didn't have a dad at the time. My mom had just remarried. And so anyway, we didn't have much money. And so she was putting both of us through a very expensive school, Cal Arts. So she said, well, the first semester of the second year, sophomore year, she said, well, we're running out of money. We're going to have to pull out, I don't want to get a grant and all that and have you guys have debt. And so and then we heard right after that Disney was coming for an internship. They were going to look at portfolios, and it was an all or nothing gamble for about 2 weeks. We just put together a portfolio and added stuff and got ready for it. Then we found out that sophomores couldn't contribute. It was only for juniors and seniors. And so we begged and pleaded the dean, would they at least look at it? And he said, well, I'll have them look at it, maybe a few other sophomores, but you can't get accepted. They're still going to pick the juniors and the seniors, and I can't do anything about that. And so sure enough, the day came, and they called us in, both of us together. We were the only people in the at Cal Arts that got called in together to get reviewed. It was because when the Disney people said, well, we're going to tell you the same thing because we couldn't tell a difference between your artwork. So we just called you in together. It all looks the same to us, and you both got the job. I mean, you got the internship.
Wow.
And so we were the only sophomores in the school that got accepted, and it was just a real blessing because we needed it so bad. And that led us to then getting the job about 9 weeks later and moving out to Florida. So the rest of my career was at the Florida Disney Animation Studio, which was actually on tour. It was part of a tour. Mm-hmm. And I worked on, let's see, Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, Aladdin before that, then Lion King, Pocahontas, Mulan, Tarzan, little bit of Atlantis before Tarzan, and then later on Brother Bear. So
So
Yeah,
just
it's
the
about-
ones that nobody's heard of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
couple maybe.
What's that Lion King movie? I should mention your brother is already on our chat room making fun of you. So
He's like, talk more about me, Tom.
he's just the lesser of the Bancroft brothers.
Yeah. It's so jealous. It's embarrassing.
So you work with Aaron Blaze a lot then, actually, with Brother Bear and stuff.
Yeah, in the Florida studio, Aaron and me and Tony to some degree, although Tony went back to the California studio within a year. So most of his career was at the California studio. And we would work on the same movies 3,000 miles apart. But Aaron and I were both young and eager and in the Florida studio. So we kind of moved up together. And later on, he became the director of Brother Bear. Yeah.
Yeah. We had him up here for our first live event we ever did at Algonquin College.
Yeah, just over a year ago.
Yes, actually.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember seeing it on Facebook that he went out there.
Yeah, that was a fantastic time. Your brother says, yeah, more about Tony. Who directed Mulan, we know.
Yeah. Oh, no. Like every podcast, Tony has to go, by the way, I directed Mulan.
Yeah.
And I would say co-directed. There was another director, Barry Cook, everybody.
Very nice.
But Tony, all right.
So, who were the big inspirations when you got to Disney?
Well, I mean, that we always look backwards. You know, I think that was something in a good way. I think in story-wise and things like that, we would look forward, but we had a real history at Disney that we would always look back to. And a lot of that was the Nine Old Men. If anybody, most of you probably have heard of the Nine Old Men.
Absolutely.
But that was a term that Walt created for some of the 9 best animators, and that's debatable. But they were some of the best, at least, and they had been there since Snow White and followed Walt through all the way till basically even after he died. So a lot of them ended on Fox and the Hound, unfortunately for them. But that was it wasn't that great of a movie. But about that time, that was the transition, was Fox and the Hound. Some of the new guys like Glenn Keane and Mark Henn and some of the sort of second generation of great animators at Disney came in around Fox and the Hound and Black Cauldron. And those are weaker films because they were just young guys. And the old guys were kind of wrapping things up in that transitionary time. And it really took a few years of, I'd say, Great Mouse Detective. You start seeing the quality level go up. And then again on Oliver and Company, it goes up a little bit more. And then you get to Beauty and the Beast. And there's still some rough scenes in there. I mean, we hadn't solidified as a group. But I think Rescuers Down Under, actually, even though that's kind of a lesser film, I think artistically it was a step forward. I think you started to really see things gel more on Rescuers. And, of course, Little Mermaid, too.
Yeah, I'd say The Rescuers Down Under is a beautiful film, actually, cinematically.
Yeah, I think it still looks good. It still sounds good. It's got a great soundtrack. Yeah.
Although something I've always missed now that animation is so clean and pretty is stuff like 101 Dalmatians and Winnie the Pooh, where you can still see all the Xerox sketch lines, the rough lines. Like I always, just as an artist, I always appreciated that because you could kind of see how it was drawn.
Yeah. It's funny. Here's a little side story about that. But all animators like the rougher line too. Yeah. I mean, I think most artists do in general. And just like most artists like sketches more than finished drawings. They like to see the thought process and all that.
Yeah, you always feel like you've destroyed your work after you've inked it.
Yeah. And it does. I mean, no matter how good you are, you're putting a final line around something that's just going to stiffen it up a little bit. So you lose some of that life. But we made a short film years later, and I was the supervising animator on it and it was called John Henry. And that's a film a short that hasn't been seen very much until more recently. I understand that more schools have been showing it.
It's also on Netflix now.
Oh, and on Netflix.
They have a whole Disney short collection that spans a few decades, and it's on there. And I know my children loved it. So.
Yeah, and so, but till now, till recently, it's been kind of rarely seen. Um, but for that short, we went back to a real rough line, and it was funny how we didn't know how to do it. I mean, it was like just sort of rediscover, not because it was one of these things where we just decided, and Mark Ken directed that, who was a great animator, and he just said, "Well, just clean up the rough drawings." That's kind of what they did in the days of 101 Dalmatian. They would just go literally right over those drawings and tighten them up a little bit. And nobody wanted to do that. All the cleanup petrified because they're like, well, what if I mess it up? Then we can't go back to, there's no original to go back to. So they wanted to put down a piece of paper over it and then kind of pretend to rough it up, And so it took, and they got really good at it. I mean, we did finally find that process, but it was kind of funny to see us have to, as a studio, as Disney Studios, try and rediscover this rough animation line that had been around since the 60s.
And that's funny because it happened as an accident.
Yeah, right.
They found a way to make the process faster, but in
faster.
doing it, you got all of those great sketch lines in them.
And they probably hated it at the time.
Yeah, they did.
All that.
We had Floyd Norman on, and he said it was
great.
He said in the end everybody loves it, but at the time they were kind of freaking out.
Yeah,
it's not clean enough. And
did you mean they were freaking out?
Yeah.
Okay, because I didn't understand what you said.
No.
You said something and it sounded very Canadian.
I'm sorry, eh?
There you go. What was that?
I'm sorry, eh?
Yeah.
I'm confused.
I'll send you some maple syrup later.
These are good. Let's have a show or something.
Yeah, well, we're trying. So, Disney comes to a close. That was a sad moment, I think, in everybody who appreciates art's life.
Well, they are still going. I don't know if you know that. But the Florida studio did shut down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the 2D animation is gone.
Yeah, that's gone.
It's anything that's done for TV is actually done right here in Ottawa.
Yeah. You guys have taken a lot of it.
Yeah, Mercury does all the Disney Junior stuff, and they're currently doing the Lion King TV series, I guess.
Yeah, the spinoff.
And I guess Tangled is about to start too. But so, what happens to the Bancroft brothers? Especially Tom, the important one, who will come on our podcast.
2 years later.
Yeah. What happens to him after Disney?
Life after Disney, yeah, that's a great question. It was a hard transition for a lot of people.
Yeah.
They shut down the Florida studio. I don't know, we'd gotten up to say 350, maybe more. It was quite a few people that were there because we geared up to make feature films 100% there. Mm-hmm. So we had done segments of a lot of the films like Lion King and Beauty and the Beast until Mulan. Mulan was our first film that we did 100% in Florida primarily. And then Lilo and Stitch was, and so was Brother Bear. Which were all three great films. We were all of us from the Florida studio, very proud of all three of those films. But yeah, to ramp up, I mean, we grew into this huge studio, right? Mm-hmm. So when they shut down, the hard part is there was no other studios in Florida. So it really meant, even though we'd made a life there, I'd been there for about 12 years at that time. None of us wanted to sell our houses and leave and all that, but you really had no choice. And then second to that was a lot of people with 2D shutting down, and it almost happened overnight for us in a lot of ways. I mean, we were working all the way to the end, and they shut the studio down, and the transition had kind of already happened, while we were still making 2D films. And so when you're working on some of the last 2D films and that shuts down, everywhere other studios already switched over to CG. So now you're like, wait, I'm behind the 8 ball here. And so I discovered real quick when it shut down, and I kind of had to make that reinvention and that redeciding where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do that we all had to make at that time. I really looked at it closely and said, okay, what were the things? What was what was it that got me into animation? What was the love, the passion that I had for animation? And really, it comes down to two things for a lot of people, for a lot of animators, especially. And it was either just the pure love of animation and making things move and come to life, uh, or it was I just love to draw, and that's what got me there, And then discovering the love of animation was sort of secondary. And for me, it was the drawing that got me into it. Like I said, I did comic strips and all that, and then wanted to get into animation because, again, it was a way to use my drawing and draw characters. So I knew that as long as I was drawing characters, it was okay if I wasn't going to animate them again. And I have since. I'm animating now. I'm doing some 2D animation for Disney, actually, right now. Not for features, but for a commercial thing.
Yeah.
But if I never did, would I be happy just and not doing it? So that made me decide, okay, I don't have to be a CG animator because it's not just the love of making things move, it's the love of drawing. So I rather than go that way to CG, I went this way and stayed with drawing. And so what that meant for me was character design. Was still a big part of drawing characters, of course, and also at that time I was blessed that right as Disney shut down and I left, I got contacted by a publisher, Watson Guptill, and they asked if I would do a book on animation, like a art instruction book, and I went back to them and said, well, there's a lot of great animation books. Can I, how about character design? So I threw out an idea to them. And of course, they'd never heard of character design. They didn't understand that I said, it's basically the first chapter of a lot of animation books. They talk about it briefly, then they go into how to make the character come to life in animation. I said, I think there's a whole book there, maybe even a few books,
Absolutely.
just on how to design a character and make it come to life in just one drawing. So that's what I pitched them. Unfortunately, they got it. And so I did Creating Characters with Personality. It's become a big best-selling art instruction book. It's used at art schools. And that was about 10 years ago. So it's used all over the country. So that's been great. And that led to then me doing another book, Character Mentor, a few years later, that has done well too. But all that to say, that also led to me getting a lot of character design work. And so really the second half of my career could really be defined by doing character design primarily. I've been doing children's books too and things like that, but a lot of character design. And so that opened the door for me to not have to live in Florida either. I can live wherever I want. And so I moved my family into Nashville about 12 years ago, and we live here now, and I work out of the house primarily and do character design.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of the animators had a really hard time when we had Nick Ranieri on. I mean, he fell into full-on depression and had no idea what to do with his life. Had to sell his home and uproot his family and basically bounce around from job to job for years. And
it really was a painful time, and a lot of people left animation altogether. I mean, that's the other half of the story that you don't hear, is that how many cleanup people and story artists and layout people and especially production people just left animation as a field altogether and are doing radically different things. So some of them, in other fields doing great, some like real estate or something like that. But for those of us that just, I like I said at the beginning, I have no choice. I can't do anything else.
yeah,
It's definitely not our dad's world anymore, where it's like, you expect to be in a career for your entire life.
Yeah. No, those days are gone. But I will say that's not just animation. Those days are gone almost at every company and every industry. There's not that long-term security that my grandparents or even my parents had,
No, I think you have to be a doctor or a lawyer these days to have some kind of job security.
Well,
even then.
Yeah. And you may jump from hospital to hospital, but yeah, you're still a doctor, I guess. But
and if you're a lawyer, you still charge $600 an hour. So
yeah, not a bad life, right?
No.
Or go into politics.
Yeah, you don't. I think as an artist or a writer or an actor, even, I mean, those are all careers that you don't really pick. It picks you. That's what I always say. And so you kind of have to go with that lifestyle. And what goes with that is you're probably never going to be rich, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
the starving artist. The struggle is real.
I know it well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But hopefully you're happy. I mean, I think we have a tendency to kind of have a level of contentment that's a little lower than a lawyer. So, we just want, in my case, just want a woman that loves me, food on the, food and a place to stay, and let me draw. I'll be pretty happy.
Yeah, that's about all I could ask for.
Yeah. Or in my case, play guitar and compose. And
Yeah.
I think it's the whole art. Every artist has the same mentality, I think, and I think we're all prone to mental illness as well.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to say that. You see that with a lot of fine artists through the years, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of the masters and stuff.
Yeah, I don't think I've spoken to one animator, well, one-on-one, who hasn't dealt with it, except maybe Ron Husband. He
had a
just-
long career. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's got like the happiest go luckiest personality. You can do it too.
Yeah.
He is,
Attitude.
yeah, he is just an incredibly positive person.
Yeah. Wow. When we had him up here, there were students trying to ask him about how to push through those times that you're doubting yourself, and
Yeah.
he was just persevere. You can do it. And I had to jump in. They said, "Have you listened to the Bancroft brothers episode where they actually dealt with that subject?" And some of the students had, and they actually found that episode very, very helpful, and so did I. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's funny because that episode, I think we called that what did we call that one? We had a funny name for it, but it was about loss. I mean, it was about times in your career that things don't go right, and you're going to have them. And so we just did a whole podcast about it. We talked about our personal experiences of loss and failure. That's what it was like: failures, faults, and flubs in your career.
Yes.
So, and I tell you, we probably have gotten more emails about that episode than almost any. And it really was kind of launched off the idea that somebody on Facebook, a friend of mine, and he's in Canada too, I think. No, I can't remember. Anyway, he had posted that he put on his Facebook page that, hey, I'm just having a down day, pray for me or just kind of think of me because I'm just struggling,
Mm-hmm.
And it was just that simple. And he said that he got some personal emails through Facebook that were saying, I really needed to hear that. I don't mean to make you feel bad by any means, but you just being honest that, a guy like you who they looked up to was having a hard time in his career, really, it helped me because you don't hear that very often. You often hear all the good news and all the, and that really hit me when I read that, his post. And I thought, you know what? It's true. I mean, our faces on Instagram, our brand on Instagram is so, everything's going great. And, hey, look at this new drawing. And we're all doing it. Mm-hmm. And I try and be honest at least. Sometimes I post drawings and I'm like, I'm not so sure how this one came out. I mean, I must admit, I rarely put up something I hate.
Yeah.
But I have put up a couple that I decided later I'd delete because I was like, no, second thought, I keep looking at it. I don't even want to look at it anymore. It's bothering me. I have to take it down. So, but I put them up usually because I kind of want to. You get blind and I don't know. Is this good? I don't even know.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
No,
it's good to do that.
Yeah, that episode was so great and so inspiring. It was nice to hear people who've had success talk about the down periods. I actually, the one student saw me as this big success or something, and he said, "Look at you up there," and whatnot.
Yeah,
And-
we were called, professionals. And
yes.
it's like,
And I said, well, we'll take it from this professional who's now been out of work for 2 years. Yeah, and I told him flat out, I said, look, I felt incredibly bad after I said it, and I thought I was way too harsh. But then when I listened to it afterwards, I was like, okay, that came off well. Because I told him, I just said, look, do you want to be an artist? Yeah, I think so. Okay, well, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
You're going to, at some point, you're going to fail. But what's going to make you a great artist is, are you going to try again? Are you going to dust yourself off, or are you going to keep trying? Because that's what makes you a great artist, is learning how to fail, learning how to take the criticisms and the blows, and being laid off, going out and finding something new, and just persevering.
Yeah. And, and there's and I'm not going to get too religious or anything, but there's a Bible verse that talks about seasons, right? And there are seasons in your life. And I like that term a lot, because it's comforting in a way to realize that I'm just in a phase of my life right now where I'm going to be out of work, or I'm going to be whatever, kind of struggling with my art. But because just that term alone, season, means that there is going to be an end to it. The sun will come out. I'm in a winter season or whatever, but the rain's going to stop. The sun will come out. It'll get warm. I'll come out of it eventually. And it's so hard to remember that when you're in that season, that down season. But there's another season coming around, and it always does. It always comes around. Mm-hmm. You just got to hang into it. And it may not be the answer to that problem, to my drawing. I want to draw men better or women better. I want to draw kids. I want to get my portfolio accepted at CalArts. It may not be that ends and you get accepted, or that answer comes the way you want, but other things in your life happen. A girlfriend, a boyfriend, you know what I mean? Reconnection with a family member that you lost, that can really just be as powerful or more powerful of a life change, that then in turn gets you out of another funk, So I'm not trying to get too philosophical, but
well, I mean, there are
that.
powers out there that, it's like you look for a power greater than yourself, and it's like sometimes all that really is the guy sitting next to you. That's adding to, that's two people are greater than one. Two heads are better than one.
I agree.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to start talking about your Kickstarter, because we're about halfway through.
Let's get commercial.
And I want to let everybody know that there is a live chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can join the live chat and ask Tony. Ask Tom. You can ask Tony too. He's on there, stalking us. But you can ask Tom any questions you'd like to know about his career, about his Kickstarter, especially about the Kickstarter. And I'll read them off to him, and that's that. So type away. So you've done other art books. Why do this Kickstarter?
Well, it's a good question. I've done the things that you see at conventions, comic book conventions, like the little ash can, tiny little sketchbooks, and I've done a few that were in black and white. I upgraded and did a one or two in color, but they're always these tiny little books. And then meanwhile, I start seeing some of these really great artists like Humberto Ramos and J. Scott Campbell, and they're starting to get into these nice big 8.5 by 12 hardcover books, and they'll put out a new one every year. And I started thinking, I'd really like to do that, but I didn't really feel like I had enough content. This was a couple years back. Mm-hmm. And so I started, but then the last couple years, I've really kind of made it, I guess you could say, a job or a mandate with me to push myself and to do almost a drawing a day if I could. And what that was also for, not just to grow as an artist, but to also kind of build my social networking audiences. I realized that's what I was going to need to do, was to kind of put out. And my day job, I can't post what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm under contract with other companies and things like that. I can't post that work. So I knew I had to do something on top of that. So now I had to give 120%. to get a couple more extra sketches in that were just fan stuff usually, Marvel characters or superheroes and, Zootopia, whatever it is that's, kind of cool to me at that moment. Or sometimes just random character designs. But so I just started posting that kind of stuff. And so pretty soon I started realizing over the last 2 years, I've got kind of a lot of content now. Now I could actually pull off a book. So that was kind of phase one, was having something that I wanted to put into a book. And then phase two was just I had done a couple years ago a Kickstarter for my graphic novel, Opposite Forces. And it was a success. It was a very simple kind of just pay for the printing. That's all I really want. And I sold a little bit of original artwork. But in general, it was just about printing that book. And I went a couple thousand over the goal, but nothing big. And I was happy. That was all I wanted. So I thought, well, that was doable. That worked out. So it kind of gave me the confidence to finally try it again. And so I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to commit to finally doing another Kickstarter, because I've been kind of thinking about it for a while. What would that project be? And now that I had this content, I said, well, I'm going to do an Art of Tom Bancroft hardcover, nice big full color book. And if it's the last one, I call it volume one so that I could do it again. But if it's the last one I do, I'd be happy just to have these around to give out or sell at conventions. So that's what I did. So I just set out that goal. And I think a fairly fair, mostly just pay for the price of the printing and the shipping and a graphic designer to put it together. And that's pretty much all I had in mind, which I think was about $13,500 was what I was asking. Mm-hmm. And it took off. It really, day one, I accomplished that goal plus some. So I was fully funded the first day. And the second day, it just kept going up, and it kind of level out by the third day, and we've been it's kept a little bit more of a coast after the third day, and there's a few reasons for that. The biggest one being that I had two kind of I had a very low tier, which was an early bird special for the book. I think you get it for $20, and it was only for the first 100 people.
Yeah,
that ran out right away, and so that kind of hurt me. And then I also had really high tiers, which were like a whole character design course that I'm going to introduce. And it was premiering through this Kickstarter. And that was like about $400 for the early bird special. So it's a higher end price. And then also I had some original artwork that was a couple hundred or, somewhere in the middle there. Well, all the original artwork sold, and those early bird specials within the first day or two, and then likewise all the high end tiers did also. So basically, all the Kickstarter is now is buy my book. It's $30 because everything ran out. So that's kind of why it's kind of leveled off. And I don't know. By all means, I'm not upset by that. It's actually, there's a part of me, and I hate to say this because I want people to keep backing the Kickstarter, but if it died tomorrow, I'd be happy. I honestly would. I don't need it to go higher than it is. I really started out just wanting to make this book, and then we added the idea, my partner and I, on Top by a Pro, of like, hey, well, why don't we premiere this character design course that we were going to do anyway, and this will be a good way for people to hear about it. So we added that to the top tier, and we never expected that to sell out as fast as it did, and that went right away. And so it lifted the numbers up really high. So that's kind of the dirty little secret. It's not the Art of Tom Bancroft book that has made it go so high. I think it's at 25,000 now. Mm-hmm. But it's more those higher end tiers that has really boosted it up. I was really sweating it out. So here's the real dirty little secret about Kickstarters. I made a critical mistake that my wife was about to kill me on. Day one, it looked like it was a huge success, right? It took off, it was fully funded. I'm like, yay! And but then I crunched the numbers and I realized, wait a second, I'm now committed to this book, but because these high tiers for the character design course, and that money we'd kind of pulled off as for that course. But because that money was kind of not something I could count for the book publishing, I realized really quick, I actually haven't funded this book yet. And now I have to make this book because that's what Kickstarter's all about. So fortunately, that went away really quick. I mean, by the second or 2.5 days, it was fully funded to the point where now, yeah, everything was taken care of financially. And that's why, I mean, if it ended tomorrow, I would be fine and happy because
Yeah, but
we could
that's a
take care of all
classic
that.
mistake.
It was.
Kickstarter people make.
Yeah.
It was, and it's not an easy one to kind of see ahead of time because again, we didn't expect that one to sell very that high or that fast, and so seeing it actually was a stress to me when that sold and made so much money when that high tier, because I was just like, I was not happy the first day. I tell my wife, yeah, we made it, but by the way, we're not really funded on the book, and she's like, what? That's gonna come out of our own pocket. I'm sorry. But fortunately, like I said, we did fund it. So yeah, we're good now. We're good now. Everybody's gonna get their book. Don't worry.
Looks like we have our first question.
Yeah.
I've read a lot about inking comic books in various places and that editors prefer the inks being done by hand rather than digitally. Is this true? If it is not, how would you approach it by hand? And that is by Versatile Horse.
Oh,
Yep.
well, Versatile Horse. That's a good question. I hadn't actually heard that myself, and I'm more animation. I do comics from time to time, and I do traditionally ink them when I do those couple small things. I hadn't heard that they don't want digital. My guess of why they want the traditional inking still is really for the back end, for the collector's market. Mm-hmm. Because the penciler wants to then sell the originals, and they don't sell if they're not inked, because the collectors want original art from the comic book, the way it was printed and all that, and they want it to be the penciler's pencils, inker over that, just like what was printed. Okay, so if it's digital, you no longer have those originals anymore. Now, I do know artists that do digital comics, and they ink it digitally too. So it's not. I know it does exist, but I've also heard that a lot of them still ink and still hand pencil because there's too much money to be lost on the back end if you're not hand inking and don't have an original page at the end. So that's kind of the answer I can think of. And as far as how you do it, it's not really something you can explain, I'd say, unfortunately. Like with most art, it's very much instructional and would take too long to discuss and show to do it here. My only one little tip I will say is that when I ink, I always pull down pull down and toward me. And that sounds like a really basic thing, and that means you have to spin the paper. I mean, if it's an arm or whatever that you're doing, you spin the paper so that you can pull toward you. Because anytime you go away from you, at least for me, I lose control. I have to be pulling toward me. So, and I think that's true of a lot of inkers. I'm not sure it's always true. But
I should ask, do you have a favorite inking pen?
I do. It's not as high end and as professional as some of the inking pens, but I think if you can get really good with it, I think you can make it look pretty professional. I use a Kuretake brush pen. I'm holding it up for those that it just has Japanese writing on it, so that's not helping. But it really is just it's a marker for the most part, but it has good bristle to it. It gives you good thick and thin. And so you can get them at jetpens.com. They have a lot of great inking pens there.
Nice. Versatile Horse has another question. What's the best way to make a copy of the blue pencil Bristol boards?
Oh, yeah. If a penciler sends you his pencils, comic book pencils, digitally, what a lot, and I think this is what you're talking about, Mr. Horse, is that a lot of pencilers will send digital scans because their inker lives somewhere else, right? So they'll send the digital scans of the full pages, and what a lot of inkers will then do is, since they don't have the originals, and it saves money not having to mail them, is that they will print out those pencils. They'll change the color of them to a very light blue, so it won't photocopy in general. or you can knock it out in Photoshop. You can knock out that color. So they'll make it a very light blue and then print it out, and then ink on that board that's been printed out. So how you do that is you have to have a kind of expensive printer, because like my little printer, the cheap ones, they won't do 11 by 17 Bristol board. It's too thick and it's too long. And so you really, the key there is to have a nicer printer that will print larger size 11 by 17 board.
All right. Haley Mullins asks, how excited are you about the future of the animation program at Lipscomb?
Thank you for feeding me that, Haley. I know Haley from Facebook. I'm very excited about it. Just so everybody knows, I'm also the artist in residence for Lipscomb University. I've helped start the animation program there, and I just got through my first year of teaching, mostly character design, but I've also brought in some really phenomenal adjunct professors like John Pomeroy. And John
Nice.
Pomeroy is, he's an old school Disney animator, but also helped start the Bluth Animation Studio, doing Secret of Nim and things like that. He's teaching animation, 2D animation, the beginning phase. So we have a great program already, year one, and so anybody listening, please look into Lipscomb University, and it's in Nashville.
And go Bisons.
Go Bisons! How'd you do that?
She said, you're welcome. Go Bisons.
No.
And Ashley wants to know, what are your favorite comics and why?
Comic strips or comic books, I guess. I'll give a little bit of both, I guess. Comic strips. I'm kind of a connoisseur of comic strips in that I also had a web comic. I haven't done it for almost a year now, but I was doing it. It's called Outnumbered, and it was kind of autobiographical. So it's outnumberedcomic.com, and you can see those in the archive. And anyway, so I still love reading comic strips every day, and still get the newspaper, believe it or not. But my favorites are Baby Blues, Zits, and Arlo and James. For some weird reason, more because I want to be able to figure out the gag every day, because it's so badly told. I want to try and decipher it, and I'm kind of addicted to doing that, and trying to figure out how would I have done this to make it more clear. It's kind of an education for me. So Arlo and James for that reason, and then what's the other one? Oh, Adam at Home is also a really great strip. So those are my three favorites. And comic books, I'm a Marvel guy. I always have been. I read very little DC comics, though I like to draw the characters because they're like Wonder Woman and Superman and Batman. I like to draw them from time to time. But yeah, I'm very much a early days I was Spider-Man fan. That they went to X-Men, especially during the Byrne and Claremont era of the 80s and 90s. So I'll always have a fun, and then I love the Avengers too. So Fantastic Four, pretty much, all the classics, Marvel characters.
Nice. Okay, Versatile Horse is back. In several of your podcasts, you've discussed a passion movie project you are developing. Are you willing to share a brief synopsis?
That's great, boy. He's good, or he or she.
A horse is a horse, of course.
Okay, I'll tell a little bit. I'm actually starting to pitch this film around a little bit. I won't say the name or give away too much, but I will say this: is that it's something I think its time has come. It's a family film, and it's actually live action with some traditional animation. And so it'll be kind of like Who Framed Roger Rabbit or Space Jam, something like that, which we haven't really seen since then. And where we have real animated characters interacting with real people in a real believable way. I mean, it'll be Disney quality animation. And I've already got animators, basically former Disney animators, friends of mine, that are just incredible. What are you laughing at?
Your brother.
Yeah.
So Tony.
Yeah, he wants to know how it feels to live in the shadow of your younger brother.
I always ask him the same thing. So, older brother, I'm the older brother. He's going to live in my shadow.
Yeah, well, you're also more internet famous than him.
Yeah, I kind of brought him into the internet, kicking his name in, and he'll admit that. Actually, we're going to release probably tomorrow a brand new podcast, and it's about that. We talk about social networking for artists. So
That's very important.
Yeah, for that tomorrow.
Yeah, I sell a lot of T-shirts online, and the more I have to work and do other things, the less T-shirts I sell. So it's a never-ending struggle.
Oh yeah. I mean, at least you see results, though.
Yeah. Oh, Versatile Horse is a he, and his name is
okay.
Adam.
It's Adam. Thanks for clearing that up.
All right, John here. Why did Disney stop doing 2D movies after Winnie the Pooh in 2011? Do you think Disney will ever make another hand-drawn animated feature again? The question we always get asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that is one we've been asked a lot, and actually we've discussed it a fair amount on Bancroft Brothers Animation Podcast. Yeah. So I know that you need to go and listen to those because you haven't been. But I'll give you a synopsis, a small version of my opinion on that. I do think 2D animation will have a resurgence here in the U.S. I think it'll be a small one. It'll never be as big as it once was. And I do think it's going to come from small studios, so independent films, hopefully like my film that I want to make. But it'll be small groups of people that get together and make a charming story that's probably a pretty simple one, and they'll work on it for a few years and kill themselves and release it, and nobody will think it'll do very good, but it'll be a blockbuster, at least proportionately to how much it costs to make.
Absolutely.
And Disney and all these other companies are going to kick themselves and go, why didn't we do that? And then they'll probably just buy that company out.
Yeah.
Well, we have Dragon's Lair coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Dragon's Lair movie that Don and Bluth and Gary Goldman are working on.
Absolutely. That's great.
I'm excited about that.
I'm very excited about it. And we have Claws.
Yeah, and Claws. And that's Sergio Pablos' film. And that's being worked on too.
Yeah, so there are a lot of little guys out there. You're right. This is what it's going to take is a lot of small groups.
Yeah, and that's kind of the dirty little secrets that Hollywood doesn't know is, and I'm going to tell everybody right now. I work in the schools. I have a podcast about animation. You know this already too, I'm sure, but there's a new generation coming up in their 20s and 30s that loves 2D animation. They grew up on it. They watched the Disney Channel. They watched Disney Afternoon, DuckTales, and things like that. And then they also watched The Little Mermaid and movies like that. And they loved it. And that's the reason they got into drawing. And so they don't want to be CG animators. So a lot of my students at Lipscomb, they don't want to be CG animators. They want to be 2D animators. Yeah. Now, I'm not stupid. I do make sure that they're going to get well-trained in 3D, in CG. But I don't want to kill that desire either of 2D, the love for that, because that nostalgia is going to be so big and so worldwide that 2D will have to come back. And that's my opinion, in at least a smaller way.
I mean, I know at Algonquin College here, that's primarily what they're teaching is traditional animation.
Yeah.
So,
Really?
Yeah.
Really? It's interesting.
The 3D portion is, very short. And it's just more of an introduction to it. They want to teach all the drawing fundamentals because I think anybody who has been in 3D animation, it's the 2D animators who transition to 3D who end up doing it better.
Yeah.
Because they understand squash and stretch and how to emote.
Yeah.
All right, we have more questions. Look at this. All right. I am going to terribly mispronounce your names. So this is Tiju, Andrea, Sam, and Ellie. I'm sure I got 4 of those right. From Ringling College of Art and Design. We are computer animation / illustration majors. And what non-traditional advice do you have for aspiring animators? That kind of ties into the last bit.
Yeah, for CG animators is, I guess, what they're saying, right? Yes, I agree with you in that I do think that some drawing ability is only going to make you a better CG animator. So I do, and I know at Ringling, it's a good school. They're teaching you are taking figure drawing, and things like that. I hope they keep you doing figure drawing past year one, and you're doing it in your second and your third year too, although I'm not sure. But I don't. I just. So suggestion would be, number one would be to never give up on that. To continually draw and sketch. It's only going to make you better. I learned at Cal Arts, and it wasn't something I ever thought about, but a lot of my instructors would say, if you want to be a better drawer, artist, sculpt, because that will help you see things dimensionally, not only in figure drawing and life drawing, but also just on your sketch pad. I mean, you're never going to look at that one line as a line. You're going to see shapes now. And so every new thing that you learn as an artist only makes the other things better and stronger. So that's at least one thing. And the other thing is just to always, and this is just as important for an animator, maybe more important, is performance. It's the most important thing. It's the thing that will set you apart from everybody else in your class and at your job down the road. Because you can't fake that. I mean, that's and so many of us get so caught up into the technique or the pressures of trying to learn the X's and Y's and the accesses and all that and the back end splines and all that. You just need to think about the performance first, and then the rest you can learn. It may take a couple years. I did do CG animation, so I'm kind of speaking from experience a little bit. I just didn't like it, but yeah, I mean, it does take a few years, but you'll get more and more used to it and be able to get the performance you want. But you got to always be thinking performance first.
Mm-hmm. Well, Versatile Horse came back with basically how to end independence fund a $10 million 2D movie, but they don't cost $10 million. Bill Plimpton does one every couple of years for a few $100,000.
Yeah, and he's kind of a one-man show. He'll have a few interns, and especially the older he gets, I think he's probably got a little more help. But yeah,
I mean, it's not Disney quality, but
yeah, 10 million would probably need to be closer to Disney quality for an independent film. Now that's still a low-budget animated feature film. It's not Bill Plimpton level, but it's still definitely a low budget film, and that's kind of the films I'm looking at right now are between 10 and 20 million as a budget. But that's having a staff somewhere. I mean, you're definitely going to be hiring a studio to do the majority of the work, and so that's where a lot of that money would go. And that's having probably a few celebrity voices, maybe not A-list, but pretty close, and having some of that in there too, and some good orchestration. I mean, you're easily getting into, if you're talking about that level, it's hard to even keep it at 10 million.
Right.
It's going to be closer to 20 even and that's on the low end. So, and that's why a lot of people for a while there were doing these $40 and $50 million films thinking, well, we're still only a third of a Pixar or Disney film, we're much less, but
yeah.
But you get into this uncomfortable world in the middle there where, okay, you're almost nice enough to look like a Pixar movie, but you're not by any means. And now you almost don't want to compete in that air. The air gets pretty thin up there. No. And but you can always get your money back at 10 million if it's halfway decent quality. Mm-hmm. So
absolutely. And focus on story.
Yeah. Make it about story.
You can have a film that's absolutely ugly, but people might still love it if it has an excellent story.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. Oh, your brother is going on. We're gonna skip over him again.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tony.
Yeah. I'm not sorry.
No.
He's just being mean at this point.
Okay, all right. He's just being a troll.
Yeah, he's a troll.
The Bancroft troll. Okay.
People are giving him attention. That's probably what's happening.
Exactly.
People are replying to whatever he's saying. Everybody, you got to shut that off. Don't give Tony attention. You'll just keep going.
Okay.
The block button.
Yeah.
All right, John. This is about John Lasseter here. He says, do you think John Lasseter has given up on 2D animation? He used to say that 2D animation became a scapegoat for bad storytelling. But after Princess and the Frog, he seems to have given up on it. But I've heard him recently saying he'd love to do more 2D, right?
Well, did you? I haven't heard that. I heard Brad Bird say that.
Yes, I have. Yes, that's true.
He actually said it on our podcast for the first time. But yeah, I would say Lasseter has, and I'm not saying that he wanted to give up on it. I think that what everybody doesn't understand about Lasseter is that he's still a guy that is maybe the head and stuff, but there's always somebody you report to, and he has a huge board, and they're very pushy, and they always want to keep making more money, and so he needs to kind of take the company in the direction of sort of safety. So the bigger a company gets and the more money they make, the less risk takers they become. And we all know from the past that that's actually the opposite of what you want to do. I mean, you want to you could take some safe roads, but you want to continually keep doing the R&D, and you want to do take some risks here and there. And because now you can afford to take those risks, supposedly, but maybe just keep them smaller ones so that they could become major things. But I don't think that Disney or Pixar is really looking that way. They're now at the point where they have to make a blockbuster. Every single film has to be a blockbuster because they have so much money behind in their group. I mean, just to afford. It's funny because Disney, to make a Disney movie, has to pay all these Disney employees, and we don't think about that, but. All their marketing people, and that's such a big group of people that it has to be a big budget film to pay for all those people.
Yeah.
And so you can't make a small independent film there anymore. Just can't. Now, would it be smart of Disney, and this is where I think they should go if they want to bring back 2D, they should partner and basically buy out a small studio, be it in Canada or preferably the U.S., and one that's already out there, one that's running, or give them seed money to start something up, and kind of leave them alone, and basically just oversee their story a little bit, and of course distribute their film when it's done, but keep it low budget. Don't put the whole Disney machine on it, and you could keep it a lot lower budget. Let them make it a trim production, and that is like, but still have the giant behind it to actually distribute it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How can you not make money? I mean,
absolutely.
I really think that's like almost gold bars at that point.
Bring back the raccoons.
Oh, Nick, it would kill you for saying that.
Oh, that's a Canadian TV show. I got it.
Yeah, Nick. That was Nick Ranieri's first job, and he hated it.
Oh, really?
All right. Versatile Horse has just one last thing to say here, and we're going to wrap up within the next 5 minutes. So he says, before I miss the opportunity to say this, you and your brother have had such a huge impact on my art education and my creativity. I consider you both to be a huge influence on me. Thank you.
Oh, well, that's nice. Thank you very much.
And I would say the same.
Oh, thank you, Corey. I appreciate that.
And John says, how do you feel the classic 2D characters and properties keep getting CG-ified? I guess, how do you feel about them getting CG-ified?
Oh, is
Classic
that Lasseter
characters.
again? Is that Lasseter asking that?
It's not, I don't imagine it's John
it's not.
Lasseter asking.
Oh,
but
okay.
It's a John.
Yeah. How do I feel about the 2D characters becoming CG-ified?
Yeah.
And live-actionified, too. I mean,
yeah.
That's really what's happening, is there's a whole production of live-action films based on those 90s films, that we made.
But we forgot that in the 90s they did, or early 2000s, they did that with 101 Dalmatians, too. So
I know.
It's not new.
It's not brand new, is it? Although they are darker, for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm never a fan of it. It never looks quite right.
Yeah.
CG has come a long way, though. I mean, I won't belittle it and say that there hasn't been some really nice cartoony CG animation. I think Tangled is a great example.
Absolutely.
I think Zootopia is a great example. And actually, the irony is that those are both Disney films. A lot of people would think it would be a Pixar film that I would pick. And normally, back in the day, I would have a few years ago. But boy, Disney's really stepped it up.
No, they have, but they're using some of the old bringing back some of the old 2D animators to
They are, yeah.
push that to look more like
the
way
Glen Keane really pushed the animation and the cartooniness and the expressions and posing of a lot of those CG guys on that film. And I think he does, I agree, deserve a lot of credit on that. Hopefully, I think more than he gets,
Yeah, absolutely.
And certainly not, I don't belittle the CG animators either. I mean, they not only chose to listen but also contributed definitely on their own. So it just made for a nice looking film.
Yeah, and like the Jungle Book out there too. Again, you bring up the point. It's like a live action, but I mean, how much of that is actually really live action, and how much is CG? It is pretty much a CG film.
Oh yeah, I mean that is a CG film for sure. I mean, even the backgrounds. I'm not even clear how much of that jungle was really there. I mean, I just can't tell. It's so well done.
Yeah.
But I'm sure a lot of even the jungle isn't real in a lot of those scenes. But boy, I just saw it over the weekend, and I was really wowed by it. It's a great movie. What I will say, and I think animation aficionados would notice this, is that when you first see Mowgli, when he's walking, he's doing that sort of milk call kind of walk.
Yeah.
They really did kind of an homage to the animated Mowgli in his walk and his kind of lengthy limbs and stuff. It was really good.
That's excellent. Well, do you think that 2D animators doing drawovers on CG footage is a waste of their talent and skills?
2D animators doing drawovers over CG. No, I wouldn't say it's a waste. What I do now, if you're talking about Paperman and how they made Paperman, and they made basically the whole short in 2D animation, then they CG animated it, and then went over it again with 2D animation. I mean, basically that was sort of the process. It was almost like they made it 2.5 times or something. Yeah. That was a waste, for sure. And that's why, a lot of people thought Paperman was pointing toward where Disney was going to go in their next films, and that they would sort of be bringing back this hybrid of CG and 2D animation, and it would look like Paperman. And Tony and I both said on our podcast that's you're guessing wrong, because that was a failure in the way that, while that short looks awesome, I mean, it was a failure as a test for a feature film process. It's way too expensive. It's way too time consuming. And I think that Disney probably would agree with me on that. I think they we're just kind of guessing a little bit, but you can tell by how that process was done.
Well, they haven't done it since.
No, they would never replicate that for future.
I will read this one thing from your brother, and maybe, Michelle, I don't know if you've played any of the book graphics yet, but we should probably get those up. But Tony Bancroft says, I also heard that your favorite daughter, Lexi, and Tony's favorite daughter, Caitlin, are major inspirations to the Bancroft brothers' career. Care to expand?
Tony said that?
Yes.
That sounds like something my daughter or Caitlin probably said.
Tony went to the bathroom.
They're major influences on our career, or?
Yeah. They're major inspirations to the Bancroft brothers' career.
No, can't say they are. No, I don't know. Yeah, no, we are going to take both of our daughters to Comic-Con for the first time this summer.
Nice.
To San Diego Comic-Con. So both Caitlin and my daughter Lexi, who are our oldest girls, are going to come with us, and they're, I'm sure, going to dress up and get geeky, and they're not really geeky girls. They're my oldest daughter was a cheerleader and stuff like that, but I think they're actually excited about, because now it's like the golden ticket. even the cheerleaders are hearing how great it is to go to San Diego Comic-Con. It's like going to the Academy Awards, not you can't get in, it's exclusive, there's movie stars there. Oh yeah, I'll go to that. They're all for it. So, but we're gonna make them get geeky.
Excellent.
Cool.
Well, I guess we'll wrap it up now. I'm sorry if people have more questions, but we are already past an hour, and Tom needs to get back to work.
Yeah.
So,
well, hopefully not at this time of night. But
just give a little synopsis or whatnot about your book, and we'll play some graphics from your Kickstarter, and just let people know where they can go.
Well, I did want to say, the Kickstarter is about the Art of Tom Bancroft book. It's a hardcover book. I've already hit a few stretch goals, so now I've added 8 pages and then another 8 pages. So getting in now is a great time. So even at the $30 mark, which is sort of regular price, it's going to be a nice value. It's gotten to be already a bigger book. It started at 52 pages. Now it's at 68 pages, I believe. So more artwork. I'm going to do a tutorial in there, about a 6 or 8 page tutorial that I'm going to add to it now. And I just today added a special 2 extra tiers, and that is a character design class. And so there's 50 spots for me to do a one-on-one. Well, I say one-on-one. It's going to be an internet thing. So it's only going to be the people, those 50 people that sign up. And so the one tier is that character design class with no book. And then the next tier is $100. And that one is the character design class and the book. So if you hadn't already gotten the book, that's the one you'd want. So you get the book and that character design class that I'm going to do live. And I'm going to give out an assignment beforehand, about a week beforehand. We're going to review all the assignments together on the web, and it's going to be exclusive to just that group. And then I'll do drawing overs and kind of revisions on about 3 of them, so everybody can learn from that. It's going to be really kind of a cool sort of semi one-on-one, but it'll be a nice group of people getting together and learn character design from me. So I really hope that one is something that people will check out.
Fantastic.
Cool.
And I didn't say this earlier. I always think it's great when people who have been in the industry go back and become a teacher and inspire the next generation. And I think you and your brother do that all the time on your podcast and with all the artwork that you post on Facebook. People like you and Aaron Blaze and Ron Husband and Floyd Norman, who are constantly posting stuff on their social media and inspiring other artists. That's just so wonderful for you to give back.
Well, besides Tony, I'm honored to be in that group that you just said. All those guys are great, and that's my honor to be in that club at all. So thank you for saying that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight on our first live stream. It did not blow up.
No.
We had some people listening and watching and even asking questions. So this worked out perfectly as a test.
That's great.
So thank you so much.
And will it live on YouTube now so people can see it later?
It will. It will be up on YouTube forever until YouTube burns to the ground.
Until that micrometeorite takes out the satellite.
All right. Well, I'll send out a link about it then, too. So
wonderful. And it will also be posted as a podcast either tomorrow or the next day as well.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. And
all right.
We don't even have to do our wrap up this week. It's wrapped up. So that's it for this week in End Credits, folks. Until next week,
roll end credits.